Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Steve, for a very informative meeting that took over a little bit of extra time, but we appreciate the thoroughness. It's very good.
I'll give you time back on another one.
All right. First thing we have is the approval of minutes for June 24th of 2020. Can I have a motion, please? Sharon and Jimmy, you raised your hand? Yes. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We have two people that would like to get on remotely. It was Kate and Paul. Can I have a motion to accept them?
So move.
And second was Rachel? Okay, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? No. Unanimously, so we can get them on then. Are they on?
Yes, they're on.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I'm here. Thanks.
Thank you, Kate.
Yep. Yeah, well, I'm here too. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. First thing, we have informational reports. We have a monthly financial report. Julie, are you going to give that?
Thank you, Chairman Fennell. You should have the May financial report that was printed off. Thanks to Jan. The Finance Department apologized for getting this to you just today. We have had people on furlough, and one of our main accountants is on medical leave. And so between the Treasurer's Office and our office, we are trying to keep up with all the postings. So though this is as current as it can get, I know there's the interest posting that was not able to be posted by May. We usually wait until all the reconciliations are complete before we post that, and that's the very last thing. So we do have as accurate of reports as we can get through today. So for May, we should be about 41.7% through the year, the budget year, so that's 5 months. From a revenue perspective, I know Scott had done a overview of the fund board. Sorry, it went off. I must have accidentally tapped it. I apologize. On the county board meeting, Scott had gone over a lot of the state shared revenues, and so I don't have anything to add beyond what he presented at that meeting. What we do have in here, however, for all the state shared revenues and a lot of the revenues that we get are what we did as a preliminary estimate of what we think the 2020 year will be. This will be a moving target through every month that we get more data that has come in. So through we have state sales revenue through April, and so based off of the data that we've gotten, we do believe that income tax will be just about 10% below what we expected per budget. Personal property taxes is again about 10%, and where we have a surplus, which is great, with use tax that continues to climb, especially now with the coronavirus pandemic. More and more people are still buying online, so that is increasing. And then the local sales tax, which would be people buying in bricks and mortar stores, those have been down, and with what we've seen so far, we believe that will be hovering around 20% for both sales tax and public safety sales tax at the end of the year, and supplemental will be about 17%. So general fund and all the other funds, general fund primarily has a good fund balance in which we, with the budget cuts that we did and departments being able to monitor their expenditures, even with the decline in sales tax revenue, we should still be in a pretty healthy position going into 21. But I know Scott, Randy, and myself, along with the team, are very watching everything very closely, especially going into the 21 budget, and The sales tax revenues are what we're going to be analyzing quite frequently. As far as expenditures go, I think all of the departments are keeping track with where the budget cuts have. There are a few highlights on here, but there are reason, like in commodities and contractual, we have the COVID-19 expenses that were not expected is why the commodities and contractuals are over. We should expect to see reimbursement from that from what we submit, which those applications will be later this year. The last thing I want to highlight, which is similar to where we were in April and May of last year, is until we get the property tax revenues, some of the funds are primarily supported by property tax funds, start to go underneath fund balance policy. But once we get the property tax revenues coming in, those will pop back up.
Thank you, Julie. Any questions for Julie while she's here? Yes, Mr.
Mr.
Rand.
Chairman, where's the financial statement of fund balances we're accustomed to seeing? The tool we've been working with for about 5 years now.
I can't hear you. Can you turn your mic
I said,
on?
where is the financial statement tool that we've been working with for about 5 years? In fact, you helped modify it when you became you in finance.
The fund balance policy?
No.
Where the graph?
So page 11 and 12 of the packet.
Can we put that up for just folks to see, and perhaps Scott can add some color, and Randy some color to this, because I don't think, I'm certainly not getting a picture of what we're talking about here. Are you having to log in, Scott? Or are you having to mirror your ID?
No, I'm having to log in because it was sent outside the normal packet process. Julie, did you email it to me or?
I did email it to Jan, and I believe she said it was in the packet, but I can forward it to you.
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, we can come back to this when Scott finds it.
Then the other thing, we can go ahead, and we have two resolutions concerning bonding, sale of bonds, or refinancing, I should say. I get to that. For the museum and also for Wilhelm Bridge. Could I have a motion, please? Okay, Jimmy and Phil, it's a second. Okay, discussion on that. You have a presentation on that, Scott?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we also have on the phone Anthony Miscellaneous from Spear Financial. Spear is our financial advisors to answer any questions you might have. The one agenda item, it covers two refunding ordinances, and as we talked about last month when we look at the refunding for the nursing home bonds, refunding is the technical term for refinancing. The action item before you today looks at the refunding for our bonds for the Peoria Riverfront Museum, which are backed by the public facility sales tax, and our bonds which are actually debt certificates for the Wilhelm Road Bridge, which was part of Grossell 1A, and those are debt service, paid for by the debt service and the general fund each year. These are what are proposed to be called footprint refundings, which means we're not extending the life of the bonds, and for the museum, that's critically important because the primary source gets turned off in 10 years, which is when these bonds will be paid in full. What we're doing here is we're taking advantage of the current interest rate in the bond market to realize savings. And it is estimated that for when we refinance the museum bonds, we could see as much as $1.9 million in interest savings over the last 10 years of those bonds, which you could then apply, should you choose to capital improvements of the county's facilities. And then for the Wilhelm Road Bridge debt certificates, the estimated interest savings, because it's a much smaller issuance, is going to be approximately $190,000. And that would be, again, spread over a 10-year period and would be direct savings to the general fund on an annual basis. Happy to answer any questions the committee might have. Just in terms of process, the bond pricing and the sale is scheduled on or after August 17th. We would have an anticipated closing somewhere in mid-September, and then we could start realizing that interest savings. So any questions, Mr. Chairman?
Any questions, anyone, individually? I think it's a great opportunity for us to take advantage of the interest rates at this time. Okay, yes, Rob.
The savings in the interest, can that only be put towards capital projects, or can be put towards other things?
So the source, especially on the museum bonds, the source is the public facility sales tax. That can be used for our own capital improvements or any public facility capital improvement. So it'd be a policy decision of the board, but if the board wanted, if other units of government came to us and asked for proceeds from that funding source, you could conceivably provide those dollars to that other governmental entity if provides for a public facility. That question's never been asked of the board in the 10 years the source has existed. And we have enough capital needs of our own that I'd be surprised if a majority of you would want to allocate those dollars to another governmental entity, but you always could if you wanted to. So long-winded way of saying yes, they need to be used for capital improvement dollars. The debt certificates for the Wilhelm Road Bridge, those are just general fund dollars. It's going to be about $15,000 or $16,000 a year. So those could be applied to just about any other general fund expense.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman, on the Wilhelm Road Bridge subject, is that being paid by us and the city, or just us?
So that is our share of the bridge cost. It was our bridge. We issued debt to rebuild it, and then did the jurisdictional transfer to the city, so the city now maintains it. But the cost of building the bridge was ours 10 years ago.
And so, in the end, we have how much left to pay off?
For the bridge, we have an outstanding principal of $1,585,000. For the museum, we have an outstanding principal balance of $19,850,000. The original issuance, when we issued the bonds, the museum was $24.2 million. So we've paid off, not quite. We've paid off $4,350,000 in principal to date, plus $11.5 million in change in interest to date. For the bridge, the original issuance was $2 million, and so we've paid off $415 in principal to date, and there's been $606,000 in change in interest paid to date.
Any other questions? Okay, then I'll call the question. All those in favor vote by signifying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Opposed, nay? Unanimous, thank you. Okay. We're down to miscellaneous, and anyone have miscellaneous for us? Oh, you want to go back to
This
Scott
is
now?
Kate.
Oh, go ahead.
Hi. I've talked to a number of people about this, and I just wanted to know, one, if it's possible, and two, if what we need to do to make this happen. I had asked Scott a while ago to break down all the infrastructure costs by building and location for the county to look at how much we're spending on infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the bumps in the road that I've come to is that the Gift Avenue facility is lumped in with the courthouse. And so I didn't know how we go about like teasing apart that information in the budget. Since we're all in the room, I thought I'd bring it up while we're all together.
Do you have a response, Scott?
In terms, so that facility houses two offices, the coroner and then the Children's Advocacy Center of Division of the State's Attorney's Office. The facility staff assigned to the courthouse is responsible for the facility maintenance of that property as well. So if the committee and the board wanted to, we could look at creating a separate budget program in the facilities department that would try and break out the utility and other repair related costs, and we could try and estimate an allocation model for the personnel related costs. We don't have a person assigned to that facility. Any of the facilities staff here, when there's a need, whoever's the individual that's available is the one that responds. So we could try and estimate what what percentage of time we spend at that facility, and then we could apply that as an allocation into a budget program within the facilities department. And at the end of the day, both are general fund expenditures.
Or we could do the same process just for finding the expenses of the building, not necessarily completely changing our accounting system.
Yeah, we could also do something along those lines as well, yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, would you follow up on the earlier question on the graph and the fund balance?
Thank you, Mr. Fennell.
Well, those of you sitting in the middle horseshoe, look at the screen on the right and not the pink one on the left, apparently. I'm not sure what's going on with that. All right, so, Mr. Rand, what were your questions?
So specifically the main revenue streams that we have been monitoring that have material impact on achieving not only the originally adopted business plan, but the revised business plan, and then the other revised business plan. I'd like you to comment on how they're doing.
Sure. So maybe try and break this up into two buckets. The first bucket being the general fund type, which includes PCAPs and the general fund. So as we've been having these discussions, and when you took action back in May and then again in June, the general fund and PCAPs were in one category, and then everything else was in the other category, which includes our special revenue funds, our internal service funds, our debt service funds, our capital project funds, and our enterprise funds. In terms of the general fund category, we estimated back in early mid-April that we could see organization-wide a loss of revenue as much as $17 million due to the shutdown of the economy caused by COVID. We've, as Julie said, we've seen thus far to date sales taxes reported for the first 4 months of the year. We're approximately 2 weeks out from getting period 5, which would be May. For income tax, we have June distribution, so the first half of the year. And then July, we would expect here in another 2 to 3 weeks or so. And then PPRT, we've received 5 of the 8 distributions for the year in that major source. And those comprise, along with property taxes, those comprise the major revenue streams in the general fund. We're about 2.5 weeks or so since the departments had to submit their year-end projections for our revenues and what they are anticipating for revenues for fiscal year 21. Expenditure budgets are due here in the next week or so from the departments. So really today the numbers bear out the revenue side of the equation. What we've seen thus far, and what the departments have reported in, and how they're tracking, is a little better than what we anticipated way back in April. Sales taxes, as an example, March was down. April was down 30% compared to April of last year. We've projected in a stair-stepping way that we'll continue to see revenue perform worse than last year. And obviously we'll monitor that and we'll make those adjustments to the model as each month bears out. So in that bucket, that would include the public safety sales tax, that would include supplemental sales tax, and that would include the general sales tax. Local use is the one bright spot, but it's also our smallest sales tax generator. That is where currently all of the sales tax proceeds that get collected by the state and distributed back to local governments, that's where we get our share for online sales taxes. It is, we're estimating it'll be roughly $1.2 million or so by the end of the year. That'll be up roughly 10% compared to last year. The challenge in 21 is going to be that starting in January, that gets redistributed out to public safety, public facilities. Remember, public facilities is not a general fund revenue. Supplemental and general sales taxes as the state implements the online sales tax legislation that was approved a year ago. So we've tried to estimate for 21 what those numbers are going to look like. We heard it in Ways and Means Committee as it relates to property tax that the treasurer has collected 51% of all levies countywide, and has distributed our share of that, which is 52% of what we anticipated our levy was going to be. So property taxes are tracking to where we thought they would be. That when we were back in April, we thought we were only going to collect 95%. We've now increased that projection to 97.5%. That actually is a several $100,000 improvement, just those 2.5 percentage points. Additionally, revenues in terms of the contact tracing grant that the health department is going to see has, in a positive and factual way, has inflated Monica's revenues. And then in the highway department, last year, in the state fiscal year that just ended on June 30th, IDOT received Rebuild Illinois bond proceeds to be distributed to local governments through MFT. We will be getting 3 years worth in installments once every 6 months. When you add up those 6 installments spread over 3 years, it'll be roughly $6 million. So that's $2 million that we did not anticipate in revenues in the highway in county MFT, and another $700,000 or so in township motor fuel tax that'll be to the positive. But for those, added with kind of where the shortfalls are with our state shared revenues, we're a little bit better than that 17 million, but not substantially better. We do have a couple of other outliers in terms of what some departments have projected with their activity. We've seen building permits pretty much remain consistent or be very close to consistent. So planning and zoning revenues, even though it's a smaller revenue source in the general fund, is tracking or close to tracking. And then due to low interest rates, like you did here today, maybe you as homeowners or our residents as homeowners there's a significant amount of refinancing activity going on, which means that there are recording costs that the county clerk realizes. And so those numbers are tracking better than anticipated. Where we see some challenges, in addition to the state shared revenues, is going to be in employee health. Some of the dollars that we would have expected to realize based on where premiums, we set premiums at and which plan employees were going to choose, because obviously open enrollment was done after the budget was adopted. It materialized in such a way that the employee health fund is going to be short in revenues. Luckily, though, it would appear as though claims are down as well. So we'll see where that shakes up once Sean and her team put the expenditure data into the budget system to see where that shakes out. But right now, employee health revenues are going to be short. And then public facility sales tax, which is a capital improvement fund, is obviously short as well, because it tracks exactly to how public safety sales tax is in the general fund. Overall, this chart really is tracking kind of performance and where we're at, but with the numbers that I've just walked through you, which aren't specifically shown in here because we're really talking about what the departments have put into the budget module for year end and for FY21. We still need to exercise a significant amount of caution going forward. Did that get what you were looking at, Mr. Chairman?
Perfectly. Thank you. And Mr. Fennell, I know a lot of conversation goes on CNN and MSNBC and Fox. I don't listen to any of them. You don't either. But there's conversation around Nancy Pelosi's bill and Senator McConnell's bill. Would it be the third or fourth special distribution of the United States to its people? HEROES Act, I think, is the title of one of them. A lot of local governments are counting on some super gift from heaven in the form of trillions of new federal debt. Wherever you are on believing in the 1 trillion or the 3 trillion, I didn't see them coming to any compromise before the end of the session, based on readings of the newspaper, which is sort of like listening to any of the news channels. So I think we have to remember that we have to solve our problem alone, and whether it's 17 million, 19 million, 15 million, just for this year alone. The impact is a 2021 problem too. I think in large part what Scott is saying and Julie's saying, we had a chance to go over this in some detail yesterday, is that not much has changed in terms of the color of the sky. It's still gray. But what we're doing here is paying attention to it, acting responsibly, being prudent, 18 of us all in our own different way. But it ain't a whole lot better is what I'm trying to get Scott to say. There are some pluses in there and there's some minuses in there in terms of some things outperforming some of their other estimates. But in looking at their models yesterday and how they were discounting future months of expected revenues based on a year ago, it's pretty clear there's not a whole lot of optimism that needle's suddenly swinging, because it's all based on whether people are working, how the economy is open, whether a certain kind of jobs come back, whether the activity of those jobs generates local sales tax dollars. Here in the city of Peoria, all those organizations whose wagons are hitched to the HRA tax are getting creamed. So appreciate you taking more time, Scott, on this. I still think Julie and Randy, now that they're back from furlough, we have some more digging into, but it's really worth more discussions with the elected officials too, because having had some conversations with some of them, and of course we listened to them on the news, decrying their budget cuts, nothing is really changing that improves the outlook of our revenue. And there's no rainbow come November or December from the United States of America that is materially going to change the hole in our fund balances. So our actions to stem a bigger financial calamity for the county, I think, are still appropriate. I'm one vote. But unless somebody writes us a big fat check that we don't have to pay back and turns on the economy for 21 like it was go back to the last great year, because 19 wasn't that good a year, I think we're still on the right path here in terms of the stewardship of the county's financial resources.
Thank you, Mr. Rand. I agree with your statements. Any other miscellaneous from anyone? Mr. Ricker?
Yeah, and I appreciate your comments, Mr. Chairman. And I think as one board member, we took some good actions, tough actions back in May on the budget. And I think several of us, including myself, were saying, let's monitor, watch how it's going. We're doing that. So between Scott, Randy, Julie, and all of us, we're monitoring how it's going. My interpretation and listening to Scott's comments, Julie's, and everyone else's is that I think we're still on the right path, meaning I don't perceive today the data that we have that would say we need to take additional cuts, but at the same time, as Chairman Rand has mentioned, there's no rainbow that says buckets of money coming in to address shortfall. So I guess my short is I think the action we took was very appropriate. And at this point, I don't perceive that we need to take another reduction action at this point in time. And I guess I'll put that on the table and see if there's any thoughts or comments around that, just so we're on the table with it.
I would also concur with that, but I think that as we've talked from previous budgets and we're getting ready to get into the 2021, that we have to make sure that everybody realizes the starting position for our 2021 is our 2020 budget. So everyone has to start from that point, because there is no rainbow of money coming in or change in our income. And 2020 is not going to be a cherry. So anyone else have any comments? If not, we'll have adjourn and have a little break till Mr. Rand comes in for executive committee.
Left.